Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Let's turn our attention now to talking with HRMAB. We're talking HR with HRMAB, looking at the whole question of data protection. And you're thinking, data protection, yes. And then what's the role of HR in data protection? Joining us this morning to look at this subject is Shane Howell, who is a human resource strategy consultant. He's also the past president of HRMAB. And Rishi Maharaj, who is the managing director and principal consultant of privacy advisory services out of Trinidad and Tobago. To you, gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Thank you for joining us. Rishi, I'm going to start with you, since this is seemingly one of the areas of which you are employed every day. Privacy advisory services. And let's look at data protection within the workforce. How critical do you see that is?
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having me on the program. Data protection is critical because of the kinds of data that HR normally deals with on a day-to-day basis. If you think about your HR in any organization, they collect a lot of personal data on you, as well as a lot of sensitive data on you and your dependents, depending on the type of organization you're working with. And because data protection gives citizens and gives individuals rights over their personal data and how that data is used, as well as creates obligations for organizations in the way they collect, use, disseminate, share, and eventually get rid of the data, then data protection really does have a major impact on the HR functions in any organization.
In other words, they have all my business on paper. And so we
They know
want to
everything
make
about you.
sure, yes, you want to make sure that it's kept securely and it's not just open for anyone's eyes to pry. And so from your experience in Trinidad, what are some of the protections that have been put in place to ensure that in the workforce as well, that data is protected?
Right. So data protection normally talks about if you're going to collect data from individuals, you need to be transparent. You need to let them know, normally in a privacy statement or some kind of documentation, what data you're collecting on them, why you need the data, what you're going to use the data for, who parties that you may share the data with, and then how you're going to protect the data at the end of the day. Then the other parts of it would be that once you've collected the data, you can only use the data for the purpose that you've collected it for, and you cannot use it for anything other than why you collected the information. You need to have proper security controls. A lot of HR right now works electronically, so you need to have proper security controls on your systems that you use the data for. You need to understand who accesses the data, because not any and everybody needs to see everything or needs to see everything on you. So who has access to the data? How you store the data is also critical now, because we live in a world with cyber incidents and cyber crimes. So ensuring that you have proper encryption and protection in place on storing the data. And then at the end of the day, how you get rid of the data. And when I mean data, I don't only mean electronic formats. Data protection is technology neutral. So even hard copy files, paper files, electronics, you need to understand exactly how you use your data on a day-to-day basis, and ensure that at the end of the day, if you need to get rid of the data, delete it, shred it, or whatever, that you have proper controls in place to begin to get rid of the data.
Shane, from your perspective here working with HRMAB, are HR practitioners in Barbados actively following some of the things that Rishi just spoke about?
So I think that naturally, some elements of it we've kind of done, or through the natural evolution of the process. So, for example, Rishi would have made mention of the fact that a lot of HR information now is held electronically. That is in our HRISs, which is pretty much the HR information system. Now, by nature, those systems tend to be vetted and approved by IT, etc. And there's protection around those systems, both from the side of the provider, but also from the side of the company that is using the particular software. So there are firewalls and other security features, which by default are protecting, as they would say in the act, the data subjects, that is the employees. So yes, I would say that to an extent. However, there are gaps with respect to both on the hard copy and maybe soft copy side. And I think one of the areas that we would have to look at would be who has access to which pieces of information. So in some cases, there are tiers. A company may already have it set up that the HR manager can see this, but an assistant sees that, but the payroll person sees only this particular piece. But in some other systems, it may be a situation where it's kind of once you are in that HR space, you may have access to everything. And the Data Protection Act is now saying that it may be best to determine who has what level of rights and level of access. So I do think that there are definitely a few steps. I think one of the other critical ones, and one I think everyone can relate to, we've all gone through the process of applying for a job at a company, not getting that job, and receiving the letter that we all dread, which states, unfortunately on this occasion you were not successful,
Mm-hmm.
but we will keep
On file.
your application on file,
Mm-hmm.
in the event of future vacancies and so on. And we really don't know how long that company is keeping it, where they're keeping it, or anything to that effect. I know with respect to the Data Protection Act, what it is essentially alluding to, and I don't want to speak in a very prescriptive manner, but what it's pretty much alluding to is that company really and truthfully doesn't need to keep that information beyond a certain time unless they're satisfied that a vacancy is likely to come up and you are likely to be a candidate, rather than just keeping the information there on record, keeping all of your personal data there on record for an indefinite period of time. So even something like that, I think, is a departure, because while some companies may be discarding that information, honestly, some persons may be keeping it there for easy access,
Mm-hmm.
should something else pop up. So there are definitely a few areas that we'll have to tighten up on, as we take the act into consideration.
Who drives the process? The HR manager, or is it just an overall organizational policy?
I think ultimately, well, it depends on the organization. I believe that we all appreciate that in Barbados, our economy is primarily built around small and medium-sized enterprises, many of which will not have an HR practitioner in-house. They may have a consultant, or it might be the responsibility of the CEO, or the operations manager, or whatever the case may be. So ultimately, the owner, or the head of the organization, will have that ultimate accountability, and they will need to determine who has that. Who they're kind of delegating that responsibility to manage the process. But where there is an HR department as the natural custodian of that information, and managing the rights of employees and so on, I think in those organizations the HR person will naturally kind of lead that charge. But the managing director, CEO, whoever, because they have ultimate accountability, I think they need to ensure that these things are done.
One of the things that's been changing a lot, and perhaps Rishi, you can learn from your experience as well. A lot in businesses today, you have cameras, everything is being tracked. Everything is being tracked. Technology has invaded our spaces to the point where you feel as though, the eyes are constantly on you. How do you ensure that data protection is also in the interest of the individual, and they're not feeling in any way, traumatized by an invasion?
Yeah, you're correct. Because I mean, we now live in a surveillance society where everything you're being looked at and you're being seen. And again, data protection defines personal data in a very broad sense. So it's any kind of information that could either A, directly identify you, or information combined with any other pieces of information that could identify you. So even in like electronic space, your IP address, your browser settings, all those different things that could, if combined with other pieces of information, really affect you. So, and that's where we now have, again, data protection talks about organizations having proper procedures and policies in place to guide these things. CCTV cameras, yes, they have a purpose. The purpose is to, for security point of view, if anything happens, you can always go back and see, what went on and assist in providing some sense of security. But again, it goes back to the question of, okay, what data are we collecting? How long do we keep this information for on record? Do we have a information policy, a data protection policy? Do we have a retention policy that says how long we keep information for on the whole, be it HR files, CCTV cameras, or whatever? And you should also have on hand some kind of statement, because again, the law gives citizens the right to ask questions. So now I now have the right to say, listen, I know this, you have CC cameras here. what is your policy with regards to that, so I could know exactly what information you're collecting, how long you keep the information for, and those different things. And even from an HR perspective, with a lot of people now working from home, we now have organizations. Some organizations are now saying that you may have tracking devices or other devices on your PC, on your laptop, whatever you're using, to begin to track your work, right? And how long should that be on? What kind of information are they collecting on you besides just your normal information? So, I mean, the whole question of invasion of privacy, your constitutional right to privacy, and balancing that with, the rights of the organizations to do their job and to provide whatever service they're providing to their customers and to provide whatever service they're providing to you. So it's a unique balance that organizations need to look at and see and balance with regards to what data they collect, how they use the data, and then, data protection, more or less, I always like to say, it sets the boundaries. It doesn't say that you cannot do these things, but it says that these are the boundaries you need to be aware of and work within to allow you to do whatever, function you need to do, but within whatever the constraints of the law and the Constitution allows in terms of individuals' information, individuals' privacy.
That's right. And Shane, because individuals have rights as well, while the organization feels that it needs to also to protect its interest, the individual has interests that also need to be protected. And that individual is the one who has to agree. So talk to me a little bit, Shane, about the move now by HRMAB to ensure that across the island, HR practitioners are operating almost at the same level with respect to data protection.
Well, traditionally, whenever there's a new piece of legislation in any form, so this goes back to the ERA, modifications to the Holidays with Pay Act, the sexual harassment and discrimination legislation, occupational health and safety. Anytime there's a new piece of legislation, HRMAB normally works very closely with the respective ministry, normally the Ministry of Labor, to ensure that we have sensitization sessions for our members and also for members of the general public. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, we acknowledge that all companies do not have HR persons, and we have a we have a shared kind of accountability to both the employer but also to the employee. So we just want to make sure that the public, all employees, are in a position where their rights are being respected, but companies can do what they need to do. So we have sensitization sessions. We partner with the respective ministry or institution to have training sessions and educational sessions. Because we are I would say, this legislation is kind of in its infancy, and I know that we're still setting up the frameworks and so on to be able to properly monitor and enforce the legislation. So to my knowledge, I don't believe that HRMAB has been able to establish that relationship to have those sessions. Mm-hmm. But that is something that will definitely be coming into fruition, right, as soon as those pieces are in place. So that will be one of the major things that we will be doing, which is to educate our membership and educate persons who have a vested interest.
All right. We've got to leave it there, gentlemen, but thank you so much for engaging me this morning on this very critical subject of data protection and the role of HR in ensuring that everyone's interests are protected. Thank you, Rishi Maharaj, who is the Managing Director and Principal Consultant with Privacy Advisory Services in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, our good friend, Shane Howell, Human Resources Strategy Consultant and past President of HRMAB. I always say, membership comes with benefits, so join HRMAB today. HRMAB.org.bb, the website. Go check it out. Thank you, gentlemen. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.